مسار تتخذ حرب روسيا على أوكرانيا؟ ما الذي ينتظره الأوكرانيون الذين استقبل الكثير منهم العام الجديد في الملاجئ؟ ماذا عن البنى التحتية؟ ماذا عن إمكانية محاكمة روسيا على جرائم الحرب في أوكرانيا؟ ومتى يمكن أن يتم ذلك؟ أين أصبح مسار الانضمام إلى الاتحاد الأوروبي وحلف الناتو؟ إيران ودورها في ترويع الأوكرانيين، وعلى أي مستويات سيكون التعاون بين طهران وموسكو؟ الأمن الغذائي وأسعار الغذاء، هل العالم فعلا مقبل على مجاعة أم أن الأمور حتى الآن تحت السيطرة؟ ماذا عن تتار القرم في شبه الجزيرة وإخوانهم في روسيا والتناقض ما بينهما؟ في لقائنا الخاص اليوم نستضيف وزير خارجية أوكرانيا ديمترو كولبا لنبحث وإياه كل تلك القضايا وغيرها في إطار جوجلة عامة لمسار الحرب وتداعياتها. سيد ديمترو، بداية أهلا بك في أخبار الآن. دعني أبدأ مما شاهدناه مؤخرا. ليلة رأس السنة الجديدة بث التلفزيون الروسي الرسمي برامج ترفيهية تحتفل صراحة بوجع الأوكرانيين والأضرار التي لحقت بهم. بداية، كيف تفسر ذلك، أو لنقل كيف ترى مشاعر الإعلام الروسي والمجتمع بشكل عام؟
I think they entertain distorted reality. Because on the one hand, the Russian army is killing Ukrainians and destroying our cities, our economy. And on the other hand, they have these TV shows like the one you mentioned. I would like to remind that at the same time as Moscow was broadcasting this show, Russian drones were attacking peaceful Ukrainian cities, including Kiev. And we met New Year at midnight, and at midnight, there was an air raid siren in Kiev. So this is why I'm saying that Russia is distorting reality.
نعم. هل يمكن أن تخبرنا كيف استقبل الأطفال، الأمهات، كبار السن، الأشخاص الأكثر ضعفا في أوكرانيا، كيف استقبل هؤلاء العام الجديد؟ طبعا نتحدث عن الأمن واحتياجاتهم الإنسانية الأساسية. كيف كان المشهد في ذلك السياق؟
Well, I can tell you my own example. I celebrated the New Year at midnight with my daughter, and at midnight we had to go to the shelter because of the air raid siren and stay there for hours. So this is a commonplace. Me being foreign minister, I live the same life as the rest of Ukrainians. So on the one hand, New Year is of course a symbol of hope and peace that will come in 2023. But on the other hand, Russia sent a very clear message to all of us that they will pursue their goals and terrify Ukrainians. But what the Russian officials do not calculate is that they will not break us down by whatever they do.
سيد ديمترو، إذا ما أردنا الحديث عن البنى التحتية في أوكرانيا، ما الحلول التي تقوم أوكرانيا بإيجادها مع شركائها الدوليين لإعادة بناء البنى التحتية للطاقة والمياه في أوكرانيا، وجعل هذه البنى تصمد أكثر إبان الهجمات الروسية التي ربما ستكون كثيفة في المستقبل وفق التقديرات الروسية؟
Well, countries are helping us by sending transformers, generators, and spare parts for electricity grid, and it really helps us to rebuild everything that Russia is destroying. Our energy workers are making miracles by keeping the grid running. And the biggest lesson that we learned over this months since October, when Russia began its regular massive missile attacks against civilian infrastructure, is that we need to build a system that will be resilient, that will be able to operate under any circumstances. So now we are already building plans of how our energy system will be restructured in order to be able to sustain these kind of attacks.
نعم. سيد ديمترو، ما مدى القلق لديك من هجوم كبير جديد من جانب روسيا ربما يستهدف العاصمة الأوكرانية كييف بشكل مباشر؟
Oh, listen, since 24th of February, when Russia invaded Ukraine at full scale, since 10th of October, when Russia launched its deadly massive missile attacks, we are literally, I'm not exaggerating, literally prepared for everything. And we as a nation, we know what is at stake. It's the existence of our country, of our people. So yes, we understand that Russia may be tempted to repeat its large-scale offensive, but whatever they do, we are ready for that.
وهل ترى أن ثمة احتمالا لتورط أو دخول دول أخرى في الحرب بشكل مباشر إذا ما انقلب المشهد وكان لصالح روسيا أو لم يكن لصالح أوكرانيا؟
We are confident in ourselves and our ability to defend our country. We never, I emphasize, never, even in our darkest moments, asked for foreign boots on the ground. We never asked any other country to send troops. We understood Ukraine. We understand that this is our country and we will be defending it. But it's true that we are asking to send us weapons. Weapons that will help us to defeat an army that outnumbers our army both in personnel and in weapons. And so far we have been pretty successful. We have done incredibly well. Of course, it's painful to see all the losses and suffering and destruction of the country. But this war, it wasn't our choice. It was imposed on us. And we are fighting back, exercising the right to self-defense envisaged by the UN Charter.
نعم، إذا أردنا أن نتحدث عن محاسبة روسيا على جرائمها التي ترتكبها في أوكرانيا، برأيك ما مدى واقعية محاكمة قوة عظمى مثل روسيا وقيادتها أي فلاديمير بوتين في يوم من الأيام على جرائم الحرب التي ترتكب في أوكرانيا؟ هل يمكن ذلك؟ ما مدى الواقعية في ذلك؟
We are working hard to make it happen, and I believe that this will happen.
سيد ديمترو، لابد أنك سمعت عن الجاسوس الروسي الذي حاول التسلل إلى المحكمة الجنائية الدولية. كيف يمكن أن تعلق على تلك المحاولة في ضوء الاتهامات بجرائم الحرب التي تواجهها روسيا الآن بسبب إدارتها للحرب في أوكرانيا طبعا؟ برأيك ما الذي كانت تهدف المخابرات الروسية إلى فعله في أروقة المحكمة الجنائية الدولية؟
This is not an isolated case. Russian intelligence is trying to penetrate various institutions, trying to put on a payroll experts and opinion leaders in many countries of the world. It's not only about international institutions and Western countries. And Russia is doing it to turn the tide of the public perception of this conflict in their favor, but they are failing. When it comes specifically to ICJ, I think Russia pursues two goals. The first one is to get access to information, to files, and to see what kind of information ICJ possesses, and then to work with it accordingly. And second, of course, a more ambitious task is to influence the opinion of the ICJ from the inside. But again, I would like to emphasize, this is not an isolated case. This is happening in many countries and in many international institutions.
فيما يتعلق بجرائم الحرب، ماذا يمكن أن تخبرنا سيد ديمترو عن عملية جمع الأدلة؟ ما الذي تركز عليه أوكرانيا اليوم تحديداً في عملية البحث وفي عملية توثيق هذه الأدلة التي تدين روسيا بهذه الجرائم؟
Unfortunately, it doesn't take a lot of effort to find all the evidence and document these atrocities committed by the Russian army in Ukraine, because there are so many crimes. In most of the cases, Russian soldiers didn't bother themselves with covering up, with destroying the traces and evidence. And it's painful to imagine how men, women, children felt while being tortured or killed or raped by the Russian soldiers in Ukraine. So we are very open and transparent. We understand that every prosecution for war crimes should be 100% credible and legitimate. So we uphold the highest standards of criminal procedure. We cooperate openly with International Criminal Court. We invited international experts and investigators to come and to see everything with their own eyes. We are preparing a very credible and legitimate prosecution of Russian war criminals.
نعم، هناك الكثير من المعلومات عن وحشية مجموعة فاغنر، وهناك طبعا أدلة ووثائق تؤكد ذلك فيما يتعلق بجرائم الحرب. هل تجد أن مرتزقة يفغيني بروغوجين بهذا الكم من السوء على وجه الخصوص، أم أن كل الوحدات الروسية متشابهة في انتهاكاتها لقواعد الحرب؟ هل هما متشابهان أم ماذا؟
Well, Wagner is not only a Ukrainian problem. There are countries in Africa who know the brutality and the ruthlessness of the Wagner mercenaries. And of course, in Ukraine, the main reason why a Russian army, be it a regular army or Wagner, commit crimes is because on the eve of this aggression, Russian official propaganda dehumanized Ukrainians, and they did everything to make the Russian soldiers believe that it makes perfect sense to kill, torture, and rape when you are in Ukraine. So I don't see a big difference between behavior of different branches of Russian army when it comes to committing war crimes.
ذكرت مؤخرا أن كييف تريد أن تبدأ المناقشات بوساطة أممية بحلول فبراير. طبعا فبراير هو تاريخ اندلاع هذه الحرب الروسية على أوكرانيا، لكن فقط تضيف أنت كوزير الخارجية فقط بعد أن تواجه روسيا محاكمة على جرائم الحرب التي ارتكبتها في أوكرانيا. برأيك ما هي الفترة الزمنية التي تتوقعها لملاحقة أو لبدء هذه الملاحقة أو لبدء هذه المحاكمة؟
No, we do not put the prosecution in the first place. What we are talking about is the comprehensive peace formula proposed by President Zelensky while addressing G20 summit on Bali, and restoring justice is only one of the elements of this peace formula. But we do not condition the peace process by first bringing Russian war criminals to account. First of all, we are interested in seeing Russian army withdrawing from the territory of Ukraine. This is the most crucial part. All other elements of this peaceful process, they can be implemented, and if Russia admits its crimes, and if Russia wants to convince the world that these were not systemic massacres but isolated cases, then it has to cooperate with investigation. It's very simple.
سيد ديمترو، هناك من يقول أن كل من أوكرانيا وروسيا لديهما مواقف متصلبة فيما يخص الحرب، كل طرف يتمسك بموقفه، وأنه في النهاية على الطرفين أن يقدما تنازلات. كيف يمكن تحقيق السلام إذا أصر الطرفان أي أنتم كأوكرانيا وروسيا على مواقف لا يمكن التوفيق بينها؟ ماذا سيحصل حينها؟
Well, Russia came to our land. You know, if someone enters your apartment and says, okay, now I will live in this room, and you say, no, you have to get out. This is my place. This is my apartment. I own it. My grandparents owned it. I inherited it from them. This is not a maximalist position. This is a very just and legitimate position. So Russia should not play this game of, oh, Ukraine has to be more constructive make concessions for a very simple reason. Because it's not us who came to their home, it's them who came to our home. And there cannot be any concession on the issue of territorial integrity of Ukraine. On other issues, we can negotiate, but this is something that should not be considered as a maximalist position. This is a very legitimate position protected by international law.
نعم، يبدو أن روسيا تميل إلى أساليب التأخير أو المراوغة والمماطلة، ربما لمداواة جراحها والتحضر أو التحضير من أجل هجوم جديد على أوكرانيا مرة أخرى. عندما يحين وقت السلام برأيك، ما هي بعض المؤشرات التي يعني تجعلكم واثقين من أن روسيا صادقة بشكل نهائي لإنهاء هذه الحرب؟
Well, every day we have missile and drone attacks on Kiev, on Ukraine, including Kiev. Every day, Russian troops undertake assaults on our positions in the south and east of Ukraine. When I wake up in the morning and I read the latest update, I understand that nothing in this speaks for Russia's readiness to negotiate and to restore peace. When you sincerely want to restore peace, when you act in good faith, you simply do not behave like this. You do not hit peaceful cities with missiles. You do not try to deprive civilians, innocent civilians, of electricity supply, of water supply, of heating supply in the middle of winter. This is not how you behave when you want peace. So based on when I do a fact checking every morning, I come to a conclusion: Russia is seeking war, not peace.
وكيف ترى صيغة انتهاء تلك الحرب سيد ديمترو من حيث الحدود والسلام والتعويضات وغير ذلك؟
No, as I said, on borders there will be no compromises. This war will end with full restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity. Everything else is subject to discussions.
نعم. فيما يخص مسار انضمام أوكرانيا، لنتحدث عن الموضوع الآخر، انضمام أوكرانيا إلى الناتو والاتحاد الأوروبي، ويبدو أن المسار طويل ولن يكون في غضون سنة أو سنتين ربما. هل ترى أن عضوية أوكرانيا في الاتحاد والناتو مواضيع مترابطة أم منفصلة؟
No, they have nothing to do with the origins of this war, despite the claims of President Putin and Russian propaganda. He argues that he had to attack Ukraine because Ukraine was getting closer and closer to NATO. But I would like to recall that in 2014, when this aggression began, Ukraine was officially, by the law, a non-bloc country, not pursuing any accession process with NATO. And yet, Putin stole Crimea from us and launched aggression in Donbass. So every time Russia will be saying that they attacked Ukraine because of NATO, one should remember about this fact from 2014. So both EU and NATO have nothing to do with the Russian aggression. The goal of Russian aggression against Ukraine is to destroy the state of Ukraine and to return the people of Ukraine under the Russian rule. Everything else is just a smokescreen for Russian true political and military goals.
حسنا، لكن متى ترى أن أوكرانيا يمكن أن تصبح عضواً في الاتحاد الأوروبي؟ خلال 10 سنوات، أقل، أكثر؟ ما هو تقديرك في هذا الخصوص؟
I really think that these estimates are irrelevant now. We are in the last 10 months, we made more progress on the track of accession to the EU than we did in the previous years. But estimating the exact date now, it just doesn't make sense. What I know for sure is that Ukraine will be a member of both EU and NATO because it's the most natural political and strategic choice for both the European Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization to have Ukraine as its members, as its member. And this is going to happen. I care less about timelines now that I know that this is going to happen.
سيد ديمترو، دعني أفترض أمرا أو هو مجرد تساؤل. هل ترى أن ثمة إمكانية ربما لصيغة لا تصبح فيها أوكرانيا حليفا في الناتو، في حلف الناتو، ولكن تدخل في علاقة عسكرية متينة مع الحلف؟ هل ترى ذلك أم ماذا؟
I don't understand why we should be making this concession. We are already de facto allies with NATO, who is helping us to fight this war. And again, allow me to bring you back to 2014. We were not pursuing membership in NATO at that time, and it didn't stop President Putin from illegally annexing Crimea and invading Donbass. So every policy or every consideration based on the idea that if Ukraine makes a compromise on EU or NATO, then Putin will behave more constructively, doesn't stand the fact checking. It doesn't stand the reality check because it's not based on facts. It's based more on interpretation leaning towards Russian position.
نعم. بالحديث عن دور إيران في تلك الحرب، العالم كله بات يعرف الآن أن إيران ترسل المسيرات التي تستخدمها روسيا طبعا في المقام الأول لنشر الرعب بين صفوف المدنيين الأوكرانيين. ما هي المجالات الأخرى التي ربما قد تكون مطلعا عليها؟ ما هي هذه المجالات التي يمكن أن تغذي فيها إيران حرب روسيا على أوكرانيا؟
Iran is supplying Russia with drones that Russia is using to attack our cities and critical energy infrastructure. So we also heard that Russia and Iran may be negotiating a contract to supply missiles, certain types of missiles from Iran to Russia. We follow this process very closely and diligently, and this will be the red line that Iran is better not to cross, because then the full toolkit of pressure will be used to stop Iran from doing it.
نعم سيد ديمترو، إذن برأيك في ظل كل ما يجري اليوم، ما الذي يجب أو تريد أن يفعله المجتمع الدولي أكثر من أجل تعطيل تصنيع الإيراني للمسيرات ومد روسيا بهذه الآليات لمحاربة الأوكرانيين والمدنيين؟
Well, this is probably not the conversation that we should be having on a TV station. But of course, I think the message to Iran should be very simple. Whatever Iranian benefits from cooperation with Russia in weapon supply are, the negative consequences of this cooperation will be much higher and much more painful than the benefits that Iran will get. So Iran should approach this from a very pragmatic perspective. And if it does so, then these supplies will stop. And finally, I would like to say that it's really against God's will to use weapons against civilian population. And this is exactly what Iranian drones are being used to. They're not being used to attack our army positions. Iranian drones kill civilians. Iranian drones destroy our energy infrastructure that works in the interest of civilians in the middle of winter.
نعم سيد ديمترو، دعني أستطرد قليلا. يعني في الوقت الذي ترهب فيه المسيرات الإيرانية الأوكرانيين الآمنين، ينتفض الشعب الإيراني، ينتفض الإيرانيون ضد نظام الملالي في إيران. ماذا يمكن أن تقول للشعب الإيراني عن الكلفة البشرية الهائلة لدعم نظامهم لموسكو في هذه الحرب على أوكرانيا؟ ماذا يمكن أن تقول لهم؟
We have neither electricity, no water, no heating in our houses, and people suffer from it, and some die from it. So even if Iran was willing to take part in the military campaign on the side of Russia, in real terms, it's taking part in the campaign of terror against civilian population of a country that has always been very friendly towards the people of Iran. And this is just unfair, if these words matter anything to Iranian officials.
نعم، لننتقل إلى موضوع آخر عن تتار القرم. في هذا الموضوع أحد مراسلينا رصد خلال التغطية في أوكرانيا مدى حماسة تتار القرم الذين يخدمون في القوات الخاصة الأوكرانية. أيضا نحن نعرف كيف تعاملت روسيا مع مسلمي التتار عبر التاريخ على مر السنوات. السؤال هو كيف نجحت أوكرانيا في كسب قلوب مسلمي التتار بالمقارنة مع ما فعلته روسيا، أي مع معاملة روسيا لهؤلاء التتار. ما سر هذا النجاح الأوكراني سيد ديمترو؟
Well, there is no particular secret. Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars, Ukrainians being Orthodox and Crimean Tatars, Muslims, we lived by each other for centuries. And the only problem that came into the lives of both of us was Russia. Russia invaded Crimea. Russia expelled Crimean Tatars from their homeland, and of course, it was only the independence of Ukraine that allowed Crimean Tatars to begin the return to the big comeback to their homeland in Crimea, and then Russia took over Crimea again in 2014. So Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars, we may be praying we may be belonging to different religions, but we share God. We share God who stands by us because we are protecting our land and our identity and our nations, and we act as one. We understand that Russia is our common threat. And we also understand that prosperous, free Ukraine is our common future. And this is all. This is the secret.
نعم، وإلى أي مدى تعتقد أن المسلمين في الاتحاد الروسي والأراضي السوفيتية السابقة الأخرى يعرفون ويفهمون محنة تتار القرم تحت الحكم الروسي؟
Well, I find it regrettable that Muslims in the Russian Federation sided with Putin and not with their brothers, Crimean Tatars, in 2014 when Crimea was being occupied. And unfortunately, now Russian Muslims are also fighting in the Russian army against Ukraine in this unjustified war. Islam teaches us that wars should be only it's permissible to fight in the war only if it's a just war. But this is a very unjust war. This is an aggression, a textbook aggression of one country against another. So it's regrettable to see how Muslims in Russia side with politics and not with the prescriptions of Allah.
كوزير لخارجية أوكرانيا، ما الذي تود أو تريد أن يعرفه مسلمو روسيا الاتحادية والقوقاز وآسيا الوسطى عن اضطهاد روسيا لتتار القرم؟ ما الذي يجب على هؤلاء جميعا أن يعرفوه؟
Well, I think they know the story, because when Crimean Tatars were expelled from Crimea by Joseph Stalin in 1944, they were all sent to Central Asian republics and to Caucasus. So the story of this tragedy is pretty widespread. But what every Muslim has to know is that Russia is very conservative. Russian statehood is based on a very conservative, Orthodox Christianity, tightly connected with the government and with the president of Russia. So they are all Muslims and representatives of other religions. They're in a very vulnerable position, because at any moment, this combination of Russian Orthodoxy and Russian official politics can be turned against them. They should be on the side of those who are fighting against this dangerous mixture of religion and politics.
نعم سيد ديمترو، إذا ما أردنا أن نتحدث عن موضوع يؤثر على العالم العربي بشكل كبير، هو الأمن الغذائي وأسعار الغذاء، يعني هذان الأمران يتأثران بشكل كبير بانقطاع الإمدادات للحبوب والأسمدة. هل يمكنك أن تعطينا ربما فكرة عن مدى تأثر صادرات أوكرانيا من الحبوب والأسمدة بالحرب خلال عام 2022 العام المنصرم ومقارنة بعام 2021؟ ما هي النسبة؟ هل تملك نسبة معينة أم ماذا؟
Unfortunately, I don't have numbers at my hand, but I can tell you that if the grain initiative was not put in place in the middle of the war, Ukrainian grain would be getting rotten in our silos, in our warehouses, while millions of people across the world would be starving and suffering from food shortage and high food crisis. And the only reason for this crisis was Russia, who blocked our ports and blocked the Black Sea. There was not a single alternative reason to this potential crisis. Now we managed to unlock the ports and to export our grain. And then my president also came up with an initiative called Grain from Ukraine. And first ships are have already reached the coast of Africa with Ukrainian grain to feed people. So all of this works, but it shouldn't be happening like this. You know, before Russian aggression, no one had any issues with import of Ukrainian grain because everything worked perfectly and smoothly. Yeah. And the only reason why these trade routes were disrupted and taken hostage was the Russian aggression. So it must stop in order for food security to be guaranteed.
في الختام سيد ديمترو، ما نوع التغيير الذي تتوقعه هذا العام الجاري لكل من صادرات الحبوب والأسمدة؟ برأيك هل سيكون هناك تحسن أم نحن متجهون نحو الأسوأ؟
Inshallah, we hope there will be an improvement. We are doing everything that we can to ensure sustainable export of Ukrainian grain. And if Russia plays by the rules, and if Russia does not try to attack the existing grain initiative, then this export will continue. But another risk that you have to take into account is, first, Russia is still occupying part of Ukrainian agricultural areas where we usually grow grain and other crops. And second, those territories which were already liberated, they are heavily mined. So it will be very dangerous for farmers to actually plant new seeds and raise the next crop. So these are the challenges we are facing now. But many years ago in 1932, 1933, people of Ukraine were murdered by communists because the communists organized artificial famine by hunger called Holodomor. So we lost millions of people who were starved to death. And we as a nation, we know how it feels to die because of no food and no bread. And I assure you that it doesn't matter how difficult our reality will be, we will be doing everything that we can to save other people in the world from famine, because we know how ruthless and how bad it is. Even in our darkest moments, we will be doing everything to send ships with grain to save children in Africa, to save women in Asia or in any other parts of the world where there will be a need in grain from Ukraine.
وزير خارجية أوكرانيا ديمتري كولبا، كنت معنا من كييف العاصمة الأوكرانية. شكرا جزيلا لك على هذا اللقاء.